Hi folks, I recently remastered the Treasure Goblin series, so I thought I would put all three together into one long-form video. I hope you enjoy it. Justin's life was a series of misfortunes, each more soul-crushing than the last. He had once been a man full of hope, dreams, and ambitions, but those had long since been stripped away by the relentless grind of bad luck. His last desperate hope rested on a $5 bet at the horse races, a gamble that he prayed would turn his fortunes around. But as the final race concluded, his horse came in dead last, dashing any lingering hopes he had left. Dejected and broke, Justin trudged back to his beat-up old car, hoping to escape his mounting troubles, if only for a brief moment. However, the universe had other plans. As he turned the ignition, the car sputtered and died, refusing to start. Panic set in as he realized he had no money for a tow, a cab, or even a bus ticket. With no other options, he started the long walk home. The sky, as if mocking his despair, opened up and began to pour rain in heavy sheets. The water quickly soaked through his thin jacket, chilling him to the bone. As he walked, the streets became rivers of mud and water, each step more laborious than the last. In a bid to find some shelter, he took a detour through the nearby forest, a place he had never ventured before. The forest was dark and foreboding, the tall trees casting long shadows that seemed to dance menacingly in the rain. Justin trudged through the undergrowth, his shoes squelching in the mud with every step. Just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, he stumbled upon a small, quaint house nestled among the trees. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, an odd sight in the otherwise bleak landscape. With no other options, Justin approached the house and knocked on the door, hoping for a brief respite from the storm. To his surprise, the door opened almost immediately, revealing an old woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Her presence exuded a strange sense of comfort, and she invited him inside without hesitation. The interior of the house was cozy and inviting, a stark contrast to the harsh weather outside. The smell of baked goods and herbs filled the air, and a fire crackled warmly in the hearth. Justin, shivering and drenched, gratefully accepted the old woman's hospitality. As he settled into a chair by the fire, he accidentally sat on a plump, orange cat, causing it to hiss and dart away. The old woman chuckled, waving off his apologies.
That's all right, dear. Zeus is always getting underfoot. You look like you've had quite the night. What brings you out in this weather?
Justin recounted his misfortunes, from the lost bet to his broken-down car. The old woman listened intently, her eyes twinkling with a mix of pity and amusement. When he finished, she stood up and walked over to a dusty old bookshelf, pulling out a thick, leather-bound tome. As the old woman reached for the book, Justin noticed something odd about the bookcase. It was filled with jars containing strange, twisted objects, dried animal parts, obscure symbols, and what appeared to be human teeth. The flickering firelight cast eerie shadows on the jars, making them seem almost alive. A chill ran down Justin's spine, and he averted his gaze, focusing on the old woman instead.
I have something that might help you. My late sister Clarissa sent this to me before she tragically passed,
she said, handing him the book. The title, How to Catch a Treasure Goblin, was embossed in gold on the cover. Justin raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "Thank you, but I don't really believe in this kind of stuff," he said, trying to be polite. The old woman simply smiled and patted his hand.
Just take it, dear. You never know when it might come in handy.
Justin hesitated but eventually took the book. As he did, he noticed a small, ornate trinket on a nearby table. The object, adorned with intricate designs, seemed to emit a faint, otherworldly hum. The old woman's eyes followed his gaze, and her smile faded briefly as she swiftly moved the trinket out of sight.
That's nothing you need to worry about. Let me call you an Uber, darling.
With nothing left to lose, Justin accepted the book and thanked her. The old woman then called him an Uber, which arrived promptly and whisked him away from the strange little house and back to his empty, cold apartment. The next morning, Justin awoke to a sense of profound emptiness. His fridge was empty, not even a drop of milk for his coffee. As he sat at the kitchen table, sipping his bitter black coffee, his mind drifted back to the book the old woman had given him. It lay on the table where he had dropped it the night before, its cover gleaming invitingly. With nothing better to do, Justin picked up the book and began to read. The pages were filled with intricate details about treasure goblins, mythical creatures known to hoard vast amounts of wealth. The book described their habits, their cunning nature, and the elaborate rituals needed to summon one. As he read, Justin's initial skepticism gave way to fascination. The book was surprisingly well-written and engaging, weaving a tale that felt both ancient and urgent. According to the book, treasure goblins were creatures of immense greed and cunning, born from the dark desires of humanity. They lived in hidden realms, accessible only through complex rituals that required rare ingredients and precise incantations. The book detailed the process of summoning a goblin, warning of the dangers and emphasizing the importance of following every step to the letter. Despite his lingering doubts, Justin felt a strange compulsion to follow the book's instructions. The promise of unimaginable wealth was too tempting to ignore, and he found himself driven by a mix of desperation and curiosity. He spent the next few days gathering the necessary items: rare herbs, specific candles, a circle of salt, and an ancient incantation written in a forgotten language. On a stormy night, much like the one that had led him to the old woman's house, Justin prepared to perform the ritual. His living room was transformed into a ceremonial space, with candles casting eerie shadows on the walls. He arranged the items meticulously, ensuring everything was placed precisely as described in the book. The air was thick with anticipation, and Justin could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He lit the candles, creating an otherworldly glow that seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. Taking a deep breath, he began to recite the incantation. The words felt strange on his tongue, but he continued, his voice growing stronger with each syllable. As he spoke, the air around him seemed to change, growing colder and heavier. The candles flickered, and a low, guttural sound echoed through the room. Justin's heart raced. He knew something was happening. The room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, and a sense of foreboding crept over him. But he pressed on, driven by the promise of wealth and the hope of a better life. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the room, and when it faded, a small, grotesque creature stood before him. The treasure goblin was exactly as described in the book, short and stout, with greenish skin, sharp claws, and beady eyes that gleamed with malevolent intelligence. It carried a large sack over its shoulder, presumably filled with treasure. For a moment, Justin was paralyzed with awe and fear. The goblin regarded him with a sly grin, its eyes narrowing as it assessed him. Justin could hardly believe his eyes. He had actually summoned a treasure goblin. The book had mentioned the goblin's cunning nature, but Justin, blinded by the promise of wealth, underestimated the creature.
Ah, human, what do you want with me?
I want your treasure, Justin stammered, trying to muster some confidence. The goblin's grin widened, revealing rows of sharp teeth.
Of course you do, but first you must catch me, and with your little legs and big belly, good luck.
Justin lunged at the goblin, but it was quicker than he anticipated. It darted around the room, evading his grasp with ease. Despite its small size, the goblin was incredibly agile. Justin chased it, knocking over furniture and candles in his desperation. The goblin's laughter echoed through the room, mocking his every move. Realizing he needed to outsmart the goblin, Justin recalled a passage from the book about the goblin's weakness for certain herbs. He grabbed a handful of the herbs he had used for the ritual and threw them at the creature. The goblin recoiled, hissing in anger and pain. Seizing the opportunity, Justin lunged again, this time managing to grab hold of the goblin's sack. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually succeed. But the goblin, enraged, turned on him with surprising ferocity. It lashed out with its claws, slashing Justin's arms and chest. Justin cried out in pain but refused to let go. The goblin's eyes blazed with fury, and it let out a guttural roar. With a burst of strength, it knocked Justin to the ground, pinning him down. The goblin snarled. Justin struggled, but the goblin was too strong. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and with a final, triumphant snarl, it lunged at Justin's throat. Justin's scream was cut short as the goblin sank its teeth into his flesh, tearing through muscle and bone. In his final moments, Justin's mind raced through a chaotic jumble of thoughts and memories. He remembered the old woman's kind eyes, her warm smile, and the strange sense of comfort she had exuded. He thought of the book, with its tantalizing promise of wealth and the detailed warnings he had ignored. The realization hit him with brutal clarity. He was going to die. The goblin's teeth tore through his flesh with a sickening crunch, and Justin's vision blurred as the pain overwhelmed him. He felt his strength ebbing away, the life draining from his body. The goblin's eyes gleamed with malevolent satisfaction, its grin widening as it savored the taste of his blood. Every nerve in Justin's body screamed in agony, his consciousness slipping away like sand through his fingers. Justin's surroundings began to fade. The room, the candles, the useless circle of salt. All of it dissolved into darkness. The goblin's laughter echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of his folly. He tried to fight back, but his limbs felt like lead, heavy and unresponsive. His thoughts grew sluggish, drowning in a sea of despair. As Justin's life ebbed away, the goblin's features seemed to warp and twist. Its grotesque face loomed larger, filling his vision with a nightmarish visage. The creature's eyes burned with an unholy light, a beacon of malevolence that pierced the very core of Justin's soul. In his final moments, he understood the true nature of the goblin, not just a creature of greed, but a manifestation of his own darkest desires, given form and purpose by his own desperation. The next morning, Justin's apartment was eerily quiet. The candles had burned out, and the circle of salt lay undisturbed. There was no sign of the struggle that had taken place, save for a few drops of blood on the floor. The book, How to Catch a Treasure Goblin, lay open on the table, its pages stained with Justin's blood. It seemed the old lady in the forest had given Justin exactly what he asked for, a chance at wealth. But in his desperation, he had overlooked the dangers. The treasure goblin, with its sack of riches, had vanished, leaving only death and mystery in its wake. The apartment remained silent, a tomb for the foolish man who had dared to summon a creature beyond his control. The book's pages fluttered slightly in a breeze that seemed to come from nowhere, the words glowing faintly as if whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. The moral of Justin's story was clear. Some treasures are best left undisturbed, and the pursuit of wealth can lead to one's downfall. The old lady's warm smile had masked a deeper truth, one that Justin had learned too late. Meanwhile, in the heart of the forest, the old woman stood at her window, watching the rain with a knowing smile. She had seen many like Justin. She thought to herself, there would always be another desperate soul willing to gamble everything for a chance at fortune. And the goblin would always be waiting, hungry and eager, ready to claim its next victim. As the storm raged on, the old woman said to herself,
That one was for you, Clarissa, you evil bitch.
It was a crisp autumn morning when I received the news of Aunt Clarissa's passing. She had always been an eccentric figure in our family, a woman with a penchant for oddities, antiquities, and unsurprisingly, cats. She had a quaint old Victorian house, nestled on the outskirts of the small town of Windermere. Despite her peculiar ways, she had a heart of gold for me, and her death left a void that was hard to fill. As her only nephew, I was sent a box of her belongings that I approached with a mix of sorrow and nostalgia. Among the myriad of trinkets and keepsakes, one item stood out: a dusty, antique-looking book bound in weathered leather. The cover was embossed with strange symbols, and the pages, yellowed with age, were filled with intricate illustrations and cryptic text. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, and as I flipped through its pages, I felt an inexplicable pull, a curiosity that demanded to be satisfied. That night, after a few glasses of absinthe, Aunt Clarissa's favorite drink, I sat down to delve into the mysteries of the book. Little did I know, this was the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. The book, titled The Arcane Art of Animal Command, was a manual on controlling animals through the use of magic. Each chapter detailed spells and incantations, accompanied by elaborate drawings of animals in various states of enchantment. The initial excitement was overwhelming. I decided to try a simple spell to test its authenticity, choosing my cat, Whiskers, as the unsuspecting subject. I recited the incantation carefully, feeling a strange energy pulse through my veins. To my astonishment, Whiskers, who had been lounging indifferently on the couch, suddenly perked up and obeyed my command to fetch a ball of yarn. It was a surreal moment, one that confirmed the book's power. Over the next few days, I experimented cautiously, honing my newfound skills. I commanded birds to sing specific tunes, instructed squirrels to fetch acorns, and even made a stray dog perform a series of amusing tricks. The possibilities seemed endless, and my confidence grew with each successful spell. As I delved deeper into the book, I realized it contained more than just spells for controlling animals. There were chapters on summoning creatures, creating protective wards, and manipulating the elements. The more I read, the more I became engrossed, often losing track of time as I pored over the ancient text. My fascination bordered on obsession, and it wasn't long before I began to neglect other aspects of my life. Unbeknownst to me, my activities had not gone unnoticed. In a realm parallel to ours, a treasure goblin named Grizzle was meticulously working through his list of items to steal. Grizzle was a seasoned thief, renowned for his cunning and resourcefulness. His list was extensive, filled with rare and valuable artifacts, and he took great pride in his work. Each item on his list had been carefully chosen for its unique properties, and Grizzle had mastered various magical techniques to acquire these treasures, often outsmarting the most vigilant of guards. One fateful evening, as Grizzle was poring over his list, a new item appeared: the antique book. Its magical properties were well known in the goblin world, and it was considered a highly coveted prize. The book was said to contain spells of unparalleled power, including incantations that could control the elements, summon mythical creatures, and bend reality itself. Such spells would provide Grizzle with an immense advantage in his thieving endeavors, allowing him to achieve feats that were previously impossible. Grizzle's eyes gleamed with greed as he read the description. He knew that acquiring the book would not only elevate his status among his peers but also grant him unprecedented power. With such an artifact in his possession, he could become the most formidable thief in the goblin realm, capable of orchestrating heists that would be talked about for centuries. Driven by this newfound ambition, Grizzle immediately set his sights on the book, determined to make it his own at any cost. It was a quiet night, the kind where the silence feels almost tangible. I was drinking and engrossed in the book, practicing a particularly complex spell, when a sudden shimmer in the air caught my attention. Before I could react, a golden portal materialized in front of me, and out stepped a small, grotesque creature. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, short and stout, with leathery skin, sharp teeth, and glowing yellow eyes. A treasure goblin. The goblin's eyes locked onto the book, and without a moment's hesitation, he lunged at it. Instinctively, I kicked out, sending the creature sprawling across the floor. The goblin let out a guttural snarl, clearly enraged. It scrambled back into the portal, which closed with a flash of light. For a moment, I sat there, stunned and bewildered. Had I really just seen a goblin? Or was it the absinthe playing tricks on my mind? I looked at the book, then at the empty space where the portal had been, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. Back in his realm, Grizzle was seething with rage. Never before had he been so humiliated. He paced back and forth, fuming over his failure. The book was within his grasp, and yet he had been thwarted by a mere human. He couldn't let this stand. Determined to succeed, Grizzle began devising a new plan. This time, he wouldn't rely on brute force. He would use his cunning and guile to outsmart the human and claim the book. After all, he was a treasure goblin, and no mere mortal could outwit him. Grizzle's plan was straightforward and efficient. He knew he needed to act quickly, so he decided to strike the very next night. He recalled how the human had been drinking absinthe and appeared less alert during the late hours. This would be the perfect time to make his move. First, Grizzle would gather a small vial of sleeping powder, a potent concoction that could render the human unconscious with just a whiff. He would also bring a shadow cloak to enhance his natural goblin stealth, making him nearly invisible in the darkness. The next night, I was on high alert. Despite my initial disbelief, I couldn't shake the feeling that the goblin encounter had been real. Anticipating another visit, I prepared my home with makeshift defenses. I kept a flashlight and a broomstick by my side, ready to fend off any intruders. Sure enough, the golden portal appeared again, and out stepped Grizzle. This time, he moved more sneakily, his eyes scanning the room with wary precision. The tension was palpable as we stared each other down. The goblin made a feint towards the book, but I was ready. Swinging the broomstick, I managed to knock him back. He quickly recovered, dodging my next strike with surprising agility. The struggle continued, each of us refusing to back down. Grizzle lunged at me with a snarl, his sharp claws aiming for the book. I countered with another swift swing of the broomstick, hitting him squarely and sending him sprawling. For a moment, he lay there, stunned and visibly enraged. With a look of frustration, Grizzle scrambled to his feet, glaring at me with fiery eyes. He darted towards the golden portal, and just as I made another attempt to stop him, he leaped through it. The portal closed behind him in a flash of light, leaving me panting and shaken. The goblin was indeed real, and his ability to escape through his portal meant he could return at any time. His anger was clear, and I knew he would be back. The stakes were high, and I had to find a way to end this, once and for all. Determined to catch the goblin, I spent the next day setting traps around my home. I rigged the windows and doors with makeshift alarms, using pots and pans that would clatter loudly if disturbed. I also placed tripwires and snares in strategic locations, hoping to catch the goblin off guard. As night fell, I waited in anticipation, the book securely tucked under my arm. I could feel the tension mounting with each passing minute, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew the goblin would return, and this time I was ready to catch him. It was well past midnight when the portal opened once more. Grizzle stepped through, his eyes darting around the room, taking in the various traps I had set. He moved cautiously, but I could see the determination in his eyes. This was his final attempt, and he wasn't going to back down easily. The goblin crept forward, avoiding the tripwires and alarms with surprising deftness. But just as he reached the book, a snare tightened around his ankle, yanking him off his feet. He let out a shriek of frustration as he dangled upside down, struggling to free himself. I approached him slowly with my broomstick in hand. "Why are you after this book?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Grizzle glared at me, his eyes filled with malice.
It's a treasure, and treasures belong to me. Let me go, human, or you'll regret it.
But I wasn't about to be intimidated. I said, "Not until you tell me how to stop you from coming back." The goblin hesitated. Then a sly grin spread across his face.
I can offer you something in exchange for my freedom. It's a relic that allows you to create portals. Think about it. You'll have the ability to go anywhere and steal anything.
The offer was tempting, and I could see the truth in his eyes. I weighed my options carefully, then finally nodded. "Give me the relic, and I'll let you go." Grizzle reached into a pouch at his side and produced a small, ornate device. The relic was a beautifully crafted artifact, small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. It was made of a dark, polished metal, intricately engraved with runes and symbols that glowed faintly with an eerie light. In the center was a small, gleaming gem that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As I took the relic from him, I felt a surge of power emanating from it, a strange energy that sent a shiver down my spine. Grizzle's reluctance to part with it was evident, and I sensed the relic's significance. Grizzle's eyes flickered with a mix of pride and regret as he began to speak.
This relic was forged in a parallel world on the peaks of the Ariat summit by the ancient sorcerer Talrasha. It draws its power from the very fabric of reality in that world, allowing the wielder to bend space and time. With it, you can create portals to any place you desire. But beware, human. This power comes at a cost.
True to my word, I cut him down and watched as he scrambled back into the portal, which closed behind him with a flash. Holding the relic in my hand, I couldn't help but marvel at its craftsmanship and the potential it held. The goblin was gone, but I knew my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. With the Portal Maker relic in my possession, I began to experiment with its capabilities. At first, I used it sparingly, creating small portals to nearby locations. I stole trivial items, food, trinkets, things that wouldn't be missed. The thrill of using the relic was exhilarating, and I found myself becoming increasingly daring. As my confidence grew, so did my greed. I started targeting more valuable items, jewelry, cash, and rare artifacts. The portals made it easy to bypass security systems, and I quickly amassed a small fortune. The power was intoxicating, and I reveled in my newfound wealth. However, with each use of the relic, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. My skin grew rougher, my nails sharper, and my features more grotesque. At first, I dismissed these changes as minor side effects, but as time went on, they became impossible to ignore. One morning, as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, the full extent of my transformation became clear. My once human features had morphed into those of a goblin. Panic set in as I realized the relic had cursed me, turning me into the very creature I had fought against. Desperation led me to search the book for a solution, but there was nothing about reversing the transformation. The curse was irreversible, and I was doomed to live as a goblin. In time, I came to accept my fate, embracing my new identity. As the transformation completed, I found myself driven by an insatiable greed. The relic's power had corrupted me entirely, and I continued to use it to steal and amass wealth. I became a true treasure goblin, perpetuating the cycle of greed and theft. And so, the curse lives on, passed from one goblin to the next, each driven by the same insatiable hunger for treasure. The book remains hidden, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim, ready to continue the cycle of magic and madness. I was 19 when my life shattered. It was a warm summer night, and my twin sister, Lisa, had just turned 19 as well. We were inseparable, our bond strengthened by years of shared secrets and dreams. That night, we decided to explore an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. a dare from some friends that seemed like harmless fun. The house stood as a dark silhouette against the twilight sky, its once grand structure now a skeleton of decaying wood and broken glass. Its reputation as a haunted relic only added to our excitement. We slipped through a gap in the overgrown hedges and made our way to the creaky front door. As we stepped inside, the musty scent of neglect greeted us, and the floorboards groaned under our weight. With flashlights in hand, we navigated through the dim, cluttered rooms. Shadows danced on the walls, creating eerie shapes that fueled our adrenaline. We laughed nervously at the creaks and groans, trying to mask our unease. The thrill of the unknown spurred us on, each step deeper into the house bringing a mix of fear and excitement. As we crept through the dilapidated halls, a strange, shimmering light caught our attention. It pulsed with an otherworldly glow, emanating from a room at the end of the corridor. Curiosity piqued, we edged closer, our flashlights flickering as if reacting to the presence of the light. We exchanged glances, a mix of apprehension and determination in our eyes. This was the kind of adventure we had always dreamed of. Pushing the door open, we stepped into the room and froze. The source of the light was a swirling golden vortex. Before we could react, our eyes set upon a grotesque creature. A treasure goblin with glinting eyes and sharp teeth emerged from the shadows. Its skin was a sickly green, and it moved with a predatory grace, its eyes locking onto us with a malevolent gleam. The goblin moved faster than anything I had ever seen, its clawed hand shooting out to grab Lisa. She screamed,
"Get away from me!"
struggling against its iron grip, but it dragged her towards the swirling portal with an unnatural strength.
"Don't let him take me. Help me, Max."
The room seemed to close in around us, the air thick with an oppressive energy. "Let her go!" I screamed, lunging forward. The goblin swatted me away effortlessly, sending me crashing into a wall. Pain exploded in my head, and my vision blurred. The last thing I saw before blacking out was Lisa's terrified face disappearing into the portal. I awoke to darkness and silence. The portal was gone, and Lisa was nowhere to be found. The room felt colder, emptier, as if the very essence of life had been sucked out of it. Panic surged through me as I stumbled back to town, my mind racing with disbelief and terror. I knew no one would believe my story of a treasure goblin and a magical portal. The thought of explaining it to anyone seemed absurd, and yet the memory was seared into my mind with a vividness that made denial impossible. For days, I wandered through a fog of grief and determination. Every night, I returned to the abandoned house, hoping against hope that the portal would reappear and I could rescue Lisa. Each visit ended in crushing disappointment, the house standing silent and indifferent to my pleas. One night, as I roamed the house for the umpteenth time, I felt a presence behind me. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine. I turned slowly, my flashlight casting a feeble beam into the darkness. There was nothing there. I let out a shaky breath, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on my shoulder with bone-chilling coldness. I screamed, spinning around to find myself face to face with the ghostly visage of Lisa. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth moving soundlessly. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest, and she vanished as quickly as she had appeared. The encounter left me shaken, but also filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Lisa was trapped somewhere, caught between our world and another. I vowed silently to do whatever it took to bring my sister back. The abandoned house, once a place of fear, became my beacon of hope, the gateway to the unknown that held the key to my sister's fate. Over the next few years, I devoted myself to becoming stronger. My once slim frame transformed into a powerhouse of muscle thanks to a fervor that bordered on obsession. The haunting image of Lisa's face, filled with fear, drove me relentlessly. I told myself to do whatever it took, so I hit the gym every day, pushing my body to its limits and beyond. Everything was on the table: steroids, advanced training techniques, and the latest in fitness technology all became part of my regimen. My single-minded focus was to prepare for the day I would face the goblin again. I became obsessed with treasure goblins, devouring every piece of lore and legend I could find. Late nights were spent poring over ancient texts and obscure websites, searching for any clue about their origins and weaknesses. The more I learned, the deeper my obsession grew. I knew I needed to be stronger, faster, and more skilled than ever if I were to have any chance of rescuing Lisa and defeating these creatures. Joining the local MMA gym was a turning point. There, I learned to fight with deadly precision, honing my skills in various martial arts and combat techniques. My trainers were amazed at my dedication, but they couldn't understand the fire that burned within me. Every punch, every kick, every grapple was fueled by my burning desire for vengeance. Despite the years passing, my resolve never wavered. The image of Lisa's terrified face haunted my dreams and fueled my determination. By the time I turned 21, I was a formidable force, a young man with the strength and skills to back up my relentless pursuit of treasure goblins. I had become a weapon, forged in the fires of grief and driven by an unyielding will to save my sister and exact revenge on the monstrous creature that had taken her from me. For years, I had kept returning to the abandoned house, hoping to see Lisa again or find some clue about her whereabouts. Each visit ended in disappointment, the house remaining silent and empty. The thought of her trapped in that other realm haunted me, pushing me to come up with a more drastic plan. My plan was simple yet dangerous. I converted a chunk of my savings into gold and precious gems, setting a trap to lure the treasure goblin back to this realm. I knew goblins were greedy creatures, and the promise of treasure would be irresistible. I placed the treasure in the very room where Lisa was taken, the same room in the abandoned house where the portal had first appeared. I waited, hidden in the shadows, the memories of that night vivid in my mind. Hours passed, and just when I began to doubt my plan, a portal opened. The same goblin stepped through, eyes gleaming with avarice. It snarled in frustration upon realizing the treasure was a trap. Before the goblin could react, I lunged at it, tackling it with all my strength. The goblin let out a shriek of surprise as we both tumbled through the shimmering portal together. The world around us twisted and warped, the sensation disorienting and terrifying. As we landed on the other side, I quickly regained my footing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The goblin hissed in anger, but I was ready. This was my chance, perhaps my only chance, to find Lisa and bring her back. I looked around, ready to face whatever awaited me in the goblin's realm, determined to rescue my sister and end this nightmare once and for all. Before I could get my bearings, the treasure goblin lunged at me with a guttural snarl, claws extended. Instincts honed by years of MMA training kicked in as I ducked and rolled, coming up in a crouch, ready for the next attack. The goblin was quick, but I was quicker. I aimed a solid kick to its groin, causing it to double over in pain. With all my strength, I followed up with a powerful punch to its jaw, landing with a sickening thud and dropping the goblin to the ground. My hands shook with a mix of fear and excitement as I quickly searched the unconscious goblin. I found a strange object on it, a dark, polished metal device engraved with glowing runes. The gem in its center pulsed with an eerie light. Unsure of its purpose, I pocketed it and surveyed my surroundings. Suddenly, a loud clanging noise echoed through the room, followed by the sound of metal scraping against stone. I spun around to see a heavy iron door at the far end of the room begin to open. Beyond the door, I could see the dense outlines of a dark forest. My heart pounded as a group of goblins, larger and more grotesque than the first, poured through the doorway. Backing up against the wall, my mind raced. I was outnumbered and outgunned. The goblins advanced, eyes gleaming with malice. Just as they were about to reach me, I remembered the relic in my pocket. Desperation and instinct combined as I grasped the object, thinking of escape. Suddenly, a portal opened behind me. Without hesitation, I dove through the portal, landing hard on the other side and tumbling across rough ground. Scrambling to my feet, I glanced around wildly. I was in a dark forest, the only light coming from the faint glow of the relic in my hand. The goblin portal was still open behind me, and I could hear the creatures snarling as they prepared to follow. Thinking fast, I opened another portal to my house. I leaped through, the goblin portal closing behind me. I collapsed on my living room floor, breathing heavily, my mind racing from the intensity of the encounter. I didn't have much time to process what had happened. The adrenaline still coursed through my veins, my heart pounding from the narrow escape. But there was no time for rest. Lisa's terrified face, the horror she must have endured, flashed before my eyes. I knew I had to return to the goblin world, but this time I would be better prepared. The years I had spent training, planning, and obsessing over my sister's disappearance had all led to this moment. Every sleepless night, every grueling training session at the gym and MMA studio had been for her. My determination to save Lisa and bring judgment upon the goblins burned brighter than ever. It wasn't just about rescuing her. It was about making them pay for every moment of torment they inflicted on her. The memories of our childhood together, the laughter, the secrets, and the dreams we shared, fueled my rage and resolve. My obsession was no longer a burden but a driving force. I had transformed myself from a grief-stricken brother into a relentless demon, my sole purpose to save her and annihilate the monsters that took her. I armed myself with a high-caliber pistol, grenades, and a razor-sharp combat knife. Standing in my room, looking in the mirror, I equipped my demon mask. I wasn't just going to make them pay. I was going to put terror into their little hearts. I felt the weight of the years pressing down on me, but I was ready. Ready to save Lisa, ready to bring judgment upon those who had shattered our lives. With every muscle tensed and every sense heightened, I focused my mind back on the forest I had just escaped. The portal opened again, its shimmering light a gateway to the unknown. I stepped through, not just as a brother searching for his sister, but as a demon ready to make these creatures pay. The hunt had begun, and I was prepared to face whatever awaited me in the goblin realm, fueled by a love and determination that nothing in their dark world could extinguish. Moving through the twisted, shadowy town like a ghost, I hunted the goblins with ruthless violence. The town was a labyrinth of dark alleys and crumbling buildings, each corner shrouded in a sinister gloom. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the only sounds were the distant murmurs of frightened goblins and the echo of my footsteps. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound heightened by my adrenaline-fueled senses. I moved silently, my training kicking in with every step. The goblins were small, but their claws and teeth were sharp, their eyes filled with malice and fear. They scurried through the streets, whispering of a monstrous human who had invaded their realm. Their terror was palpable, a dark energy that hung in the air. My heart pounded with a mix of rage and anticipation as I tracked them down, one by one, eliminating them silently and swiftly. I slipped into their homes, dark and filthy places reeking of rot. The goblins cowered in the corners, their eyes wide with fear as I approached. With deadly precision, I dispatched them with my blade, each strike clean and efficient. Their blood stained my hands and clothes, but I pressed on, driven by the image of Lisa and the horrors she must have faced. In the alleys, I moved like a shadow, blending into the darkness. The goblins tried to hide, but there was no escape. I found them in their dens, huddled together in terror. They whimpered as I approached, their whispers growing frantic. I struck without hesitation, my blade slicing through the air. The goblins fell silent, their bodies crumpling to the ground. Each kill fueled my bloodlust, the rage inside me burning hotter. The town's central square was a desolate place, its cobblestones cracked and overgrown with weeds. The few goblins that dared to venture there fled at the sight of me, their screams echoing through the empty streets. I followed them, my movements swift and relentless. They led me to their stronghold, a decrepit building that loomed over the town like a dark sentinel. I crept inside, my senses on high alert. The air was thick with the stench of goblins, their chattering voices filling the halls. I moved through the building like a phantom, my blade flashing in the dim light. The goblins fell one by one, their cries cut short by my ruthless efficiency. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of why I was there. In a dimly lit room, I found a group of goblins huddled around a table, their eyes wide with fear. They were talking about their treasure and other vile plans, oblivious to my presence. Hidden in the shadows, I listened intently as they discussed securing the girls they had captured. The casual cruelty in their voices made my blood boil. Their laughter echoed through the room, each word dripping with malice and sadistic pleasure. Little did they know who they were dealing with. Filled with a deep-seated rage, I pulled out my gun and started shooting. The sound of gunfire echoed through the building as I moved with lethal precision, each shot finding its mark. The goblins screamed and fell, chaos erupting around me. As I moved through the building, my heart pounded with a mix of anger and desperation. Each room I passed was a testament to the goblins' cruelty, filled with broken furniture and dark stains that hinted at unspeakable acts. Finally, I reached a large, dimly lit chamber. The air was thick with the stench of decay and fear. My breath caught in my throat as I saw young women, dressed in tattered gold and gems, chained to the walls. The sight was horrifying. Their eyes were hollow, their bodies scarred and broken, their spirits crushed. I moved closer, my heart aching with sorrow and rage. Each woman bore the marks of unimaginable suffering, their wrists and ankles raw from the shackles, their bodies gaunt from starvation. The room was filled with the faint sounds of sobbing and whispered prayers, a chorus of despair that cut through me like a knife. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized my sister among them. Lisa was older, her once vibrant eyes now dull and lifeless, her hair long and matted. Her body was a canvas of scars, each one a testament to the horrors she had endured. She was catatonic, staring blankly at the wall, lost in a world of her own. I rushed to her side, my hands trembling as I reached out to touch her. Took a light shake to snap her out of it. Her eyes slowly focused on me, and for a moment, there was no recognition. Then, a spark of life returned to her eyes. She recognized me and tried to hug me, but recoiled, shame in her eyes. The pain of her rejection was a physical blow, her shame a reminder of all she had been through. As Lisa and I stood there, trying to process the horror around us, the heavy door to the chamber creaked open. A goblin shuffled in, its grotesque features twisted into a sneer. It was larger than the others I had encountered, its eyes filled with a cruel intelligence. It stopped abruptly upon seeing me, its sneer turning into a snarl. Before it could react, I lunged forward, tackling it to the ground. The goblin struggled, its claws scraping against my arms, but I overpowered it, pinning it down. My gun pressed against its temple. I stared into its malevolent eyes. "Why do you take the girls?" I demanded, my voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. "Why do you do this?" The goblin let out a harsh, rasping laugh.
You think gold and treasure are enough for all of us? After a while, those things, let's just say they aren't enough. Some of us need much more.
"What do you mean?" I glared, tightening my grip on the gun. The goblin's eyes flashed with a sinister light.
You know, we were once human too,
he said, his voice low and filled with a twisted pride.
We needed something more, something of the flesh. So, to me, some women are treasure.
His words sent a chill down my spine. The idea that these creatures were once human, corrupted and transformed by their greed, was horrifying. And now, their depravity had led them to kidnapping and tormenting innocent women. I spat, pressing the gun harder against its temple. "You're nothing but monsters." The goblin laughed again, a cruel, hollow sound.
Believe what you want, human. But the truth is, we take what we need. And what we need are your women. Their fear, their pain, their bodies. They sustain our needs in ways gold never could.
Revulsion and rage churned within me. The goblin's words only solidified my resolve. I had to end this nightmare, not just for Lisa, but for all the women who had suffered at the hands of these creatures. With a final glare, I shot the goblin, silencing its cruel laughter forever. I searched its body and found a set of keys. Turning to Lisa, I saw the terror in her eyes, but also a spark of hope. We had to get out of here, but not before destroying as many goblins as possible and freeing the other captives. "Let's go," I said, helping her to her feet. "We're getting out of here, and we're going to make sure they never hurt anyone again." Using the keys, I moved quickly through the room, unlocking the chains that held the other girls. Their expressions were a mixture of fear and disbelief, but a flicker of hope appeared as they realized freedom was within reach. I focused on the relic in my pocket, thinking of a hospital back in our realm. A portal shimmered into existence, its light a beacon of salvation. "Through here," I urged, helping the girls through the portal one by one. Lisa lingered by my side until everyone was through. As we stepped into the portal, the dark, oppressive confines of the goblin realm faded away. We emerged into the bright, sterile environment of a hospital. Nurses and doctors rushed forward, their faces filled with concern and confusion as they took in the sight of the battered, terrified girls. I collapsed onto the floor, breathing heavily, the weight of the ordeal finally hitting me. Lisa knelt beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly. We were free, but I was not done. Lisa never fully recovered from her ordeal, but she was safe. I continued to set traps for goblins, killing any that came through. Eventually, they stopped coming. Whether they gave up on my realm or I had exterminated them all, I didn't care. My mission was complete. The reckoning was done, but the scars, both mine and Lisa's, would last forever.